Hey everyone, thank you very much for joining us today for a discussion on how to build experimentation in your technical roadmap. This is a lead dev webinar created in partnership with Circle CI. The webinar will last roughly 45 minutes, after which both myself and the panelists will head over to the lead dev Slack channel technical strategy to answer some of your questions. We may also have time to answer a couple of questions live, so please do submit those through the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we'll get to them if we have time towards the end. So let's get started with some introductions. My name is Hao Hester, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm currently an EEM engineer manager at Spotify. I'm joined by some great engineer leaders on the panel today who are ready to share their experiences and insights. Let's get started with some intros, and then I'm going to start with Anthony.
Great, thanks, Raul. Hi, I'm Anthony Meyer. I'm the VP of Engineering at Charles, a conversational commerce startup based in Berlin. We focus on helping B2C, mostly e-commerce players, use WhatsApp to market and just generally engage their customers. Which I'm still relatively new to the company, just joined 3 months ago, but very excited about it already. And generally very excited about this topic. Been caring and focused on experimentation for a long time. Earlier on as an IC, making use of it, but in the last few years as an engineering leader, helping my teams make use of it. So very excited for the conversation today.
Great, thank you. Pooja.
Hi, I'm Pooja Salpekar. I'm currently heading growth engineering at Babel. Babel is a language learning product. We started primarily as a B2C product, also in a B2B domain now. So helping our end learners learn languages through digital products, through also live classes and different various experiences like podcast and games and quizzes and anything you can think in that ecosystem. My team's focus on building and fine-tuning user experiences so that we can have seamless transition from views to sales. And we rely heavily on A/B testing as form of experimentation to fine-tune that user experience and also make data-driven improvements. So excited about this topic as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Pooja. Mo.
Yes, hi. My name is Mu Olanyan, and I am a senior field engineer here at Circle CI. Circle CI is a DevOps CI/CD tool. We've been around for 12, 13 years, so one of the oldest in the space. And really, what we do is we help teams streamline development with a focus on CI/CD. So that's, what I do at Circle CI. I have a background of software engineering, DevOps, cloud infrastructure, automation, performance optimization as well. And used to actually work on software for autonomous boats as well. So I have a good software-based background, DevOps background as well. And especially in a discussion like today, I'm talking about experimentation. DevOps tools are really important for enabling teams to do that, especially at velocity. So I'm definitely excited to chat with everybody here today. And thank you all for leading the discussion.
No, thank you all. It's going to be a great moment today. Very exciting topic. I have a bunch of some questions that we can take to guide our discussion, and then I have the first one to kick off, and it's about starting all of this in the experimentation part. Many engineering leaders feel overwhelmed by the idea of experimentation. What are some low-risk ways to start incorporating experimentation into an engineering roadmap, and how do you demonstrate value early to gain stakeholder buy-in? Can you share your experience more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great question, and one that many engineering leaders grapple with, especially at the beginning. Part of my job is to help engineering companies embrace their best practices, as they implement more robust DevOps pipelines. And I always like to stress that the key to starting with experimentation, especially without feeling overwhelmed, is to begin small and focus on low risk, high impact areas. And along those lines, a great way to ease into experimentation is by implementing something like A/B testing or canary testing on non-critical features. For instance, you can experiment with different versions of a user interface element, like the color of a call to action button or the wording of a headline. These changes are pretty simple to implement. They don't risk core functionality and can provide immediate insights into user preferences. And that's really what matters, right? It's your users and how they interact with your platform. The whole goal of experimentation is to figure out what it is your users want and finding the best way to increase the value of your application. Another approach is to use feature flags to roll out new features to a small percentage of users. This allows you to test new ideas in a controlled environment and gather real world feedback without affecting the majority of your user base. If the experiment doesn't yield the desired results, you can easily roll back or adjust without significant disruption to those end users. And this is actually what we do at Circle CI, and we do it all the time. We do canary rollouts and gauge user interaction with new features. And then we collect a lot of data on it. And why? Why do we collect that data? Well, that's step two, right? There has to be measurable metrics so that we can quantify value, right? To demonstrate value early and gain stakeholder buy-in, it's important to set measurable objectives for your experiments. So, we recommend before you start, define what success looks like. And that's really important, right? What is success to you in this particular experiment? It could be increased user engagement, higher conversion rates, or improved performance metrics. But whatever it is, you have to quantify it, right? And then once the experiment is underway, collect data diligently. Tools like analytics dashboards or monitoring softwares can help track relevant metrics. And after the experiment, then present those findings to stakeholders in a clear and concise manner. You have to highlight not just the outcomes, but also the insights gained and how they can inform future decisions. And the best way to do this is to tie it directly to a business goal or objective, such as user retention or user growth targets. And then, of course, leveraging a robust CI/CD pipeline is instrumental in this process. Automation makes this so much easier to do and so much more reliable. With automation tools, like Circle CI, you can streamline the deployment of these small experiments and ensure that they're integrated smoothly and safely into your existing systems. Automation reduces that manual workload on your team and accelerates the feedback loop, which allows you to iterate quickly based on the results of these experimentations. And that's really what's important there, is being able to iterate quickly. So tools like Circle CI and others can also really help you add experimentation into your pipelines without sacrificing your speed of development, which is also very important. So by starting with these manageable experiments and demonstrating tangible results, you build confidence in the process among your team and stakeholders. This approach not only minimizes risk, but also lays groundwork for a culture of experimentation that can drive significant innovation over time. I know that's a long answer, but it's something I'm really passionate about. I'm sure Anthony and Pooja have a lot on this as well, so I'll open up the floor for some more discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's a great point, right? Like we need to have this strong foundation, technical foundation to be able to experiment. That includes robust CI/CD pipeline, the right testing environments, ability to even roll back, right? Like if things don't go as planned. I think all of this is foundation. The other two things that I really want to build on that Mo mentioned is like low risk areas with high impact. So identifying the right feature you want to start with is key. And usually I've seen the companies or even teams start with smaller changes like UI tweaks or updating question answers in your funnel, right? Which has higher impact. It does give you direct tangible results into how the conversion metrics move with these changes. And having those quicker wins then sort of begins the wheel of building that experimentation culture. It also helps bring in the stakeholders into the definition of the experiment itself, right? What do you want to experiment and why? So I think having these two things going on in parallel, where the engineering roadmap is focused on ensuring the foundation is solid, while you have stakeholder alignment on setting up the right experiment so that we have faster experiment cycles.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in too. I completely agree with everything that's said, and I think having this robust tooling, having an advanced setup, that all really helps to bring these things into the engineering team's culture and make sure this is running really smoothly. One thing though, people shouldn't forget is when you're starting small, it's also really okay to start small, right? I've seen teams get going with just simple, hard-coded feature flags in their code, right? A simple, 50-50 split or using an environment variable. Before you get into kind of the full tooling setup, start as small as the team is comfortable with just to get this going. That can really, really help take out a little bit of that pressure that you have to have the full tooling set up to get going, because the barrier to entry does become higher if it's okay. We have to build a new infrastructure. We have to make sure everything's integrated with our CI/CD pipeline, which is exactly where you should end up, but it's not always the easiest place to start. And the other thing I just want to really reemphasize is finding those projects that align with the roadmap, right? Especially those areas where there maybe isn't confidence from everyone that they're going to work out, right? And those exist all the time. And where sometimes, especially in smaller startups, you then say, hey, let's just try it and see what happens. It's a great moment to bring in experimentation, right? That question is naturally there. So take advantage of it and use that as an opportunity for kind of your first experiment to dip your toes in, where you can then, show those results, and, explain to leadership and other stakeholders kind of what worked, what you were able to see by doing that experimentation.
Nice. Thank you. You all touched like a very important topics, like also like common words I saw there was like what are the foundations that we are building, and you all mentioned culture and how we can switch, like change the mindset in the company to be to dare a bit more to experiment. So my next question is around culture integration. Building a culture of experimentation often requires a mindset shift within the teams. What strategies have you found effective for fostering this culture, especially when dealing with skepticism or risk averse leadership? Anthony, you have some of this picture to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've touched on a few of the important aspects, right? But a lot of it is building up slowly and also creating safety within the team, right? I think one of the things people are most worried about is we're going to start experimenting, something is going to break, something isn't going to work. It's an experiment, and then we're all going to get in trouble for it, right? And one of the most important things is making sure that the team feels comfortable, that also as an engineering leader, you're prepared to support the team, make sure they're set up for success, but create that safe zone and set appropriate expectations with stakeholders, with leaders, so that they know, hey, this is why we're experimenting. This is exactly why we're doing this, to see if it's going to work or not. What then helps is bringing in those reassurances, right? Do we have the right rollback functionality? Do we have the right monitoring in place, to build that confidence in both directions, right? It is incredibly important, though, as part of that kind of psychological safety you're creating, is also have the right processes in place, right? Make sure the team knows, okay, what does rollback look like? How do we shut off the feature if it's not working? And also here, it's great to start small, and look for things where, okay, maybe it's not broken, but the experiment isn't working out the way we want it to. Let's shut it off, or let's roll it back a little bit, right? Get the team used to making those changes on a frequent basis. Create that confidence. And that's super, super important. Another thing is just making sure the tooling's in place. So something I did at GetSafe, at the previous company where I was the VP of engineering. When I joined, there really wasn't much feature flagging or experimentation happening, a little bit highly manual, and brought in some tooling to help, get a more robust setup, and made sure to discuss with the team ahead of time, okay, what could this tooling look like? What do we need it to do? How do we integrate it? And make it a discussion that everyone really has a chance to be involved with, that it's not just something you're dropping from above and mandating. And again, that helps create kind of this trust, and then make sure the training's there, make sure people understand what they're doing. And I think if you do that and build up on that over time, that can really build towards this culture, right? And I think the worst thing you can ever do is have somebody get in trouble for an experiment that doesn't go well, because if you do that, then you're not going to ever be able to build up the culture. So you do need to do that. And of course you need to, make sure the right processes are in place to determine what do we want to be an experiment? How aggressive do we want to be with the rollout, right? And especially, in larger organizations with tremendous amount of traffic, start small, roll it out to 1%, see how it goes, monitor it, and take it from there, and just build that culture in the team.
Nice, thank you. And Pooja, do you
Yeah.
want to share something?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I think Anthony really covered it well here. But again, fostering that internal culture of experimentation does start with leadership, encouraging teams to try new ideas without fear or failure, because that's really important. Because at the end of the day, encouraging team members to experiment and to try new things is the way that innovation happens. And additionally, right? You can't really encourage people to try things and break things without making sure that the environment is good. So I know Anthony already touched on this, but having a safe environment where failures are viewed as learning opportunities, right? And also making sure that you have tooling in place, something in place to make sure that if something does go wrong, a rollback can happen, right? You can take your application and move it back to a version that you do know was working. That way, if something does go wrong, it's not something that's going to, stop the whole show immediately and have everybody, on code red. So making sure that the environment is set up so that you can, actually fail. And then of course, I think, also something I want to add on is also celebrate successes, right? Be able to recognize and share, instances where, you have successful experiments and valuable learnings from, something that went wrong initially or something that you decided to try and roll out and see whether or not it worked. Because also promoting those successes amongst team members will encourage them and create, again, more of that culture, build that culture of experimentation.
Nice. Thank you. So yeah, like very insightful opinions there, like very insightful perspectives. It is a lot about learning, right? And how do we make the learning more effective, celebrating the success, but also celebrating the failures and learning from that. I find that also we have touched topics such as like how do we know that we've succeeded? How do you know that we didn't succeed? So my next question is about this, like how do we measure success or failure? Experiments can fail, but they often provide valuable insights, both ways, success or failure. How do you define and communicate the success of an experiment, even when the result isn't what you hoped for? Pooja.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite questions to be asked in general as well. What does success look like? And I think like what we've done is not to define success by outcomes, but define it by the insights gained, right? Because either outcome is a successful experiments, right? You could learn something that you did not hope for. And some of the key metrics for success, as I see in experimentation or culture of experimentation, is one, hypothesis validation, right? So what hypothesis did you start with, and was it validated or invalidated? And both of them are valid outcomes after an experiment is run. The other one, as I said, is insights gained, right? So how does your user base behave to this change? And that leads to, iterative changes of what you want to build over. And that is also a successful outcome. Had you not run an experiment, you would probably be closed into your own world, not really looking into the user behaviors, right? So I think that is a very, very how do I say, the successful insights that running experimentation gives in any teams. Same for performances as well, right? So if your hypothesis is not user facing but performance optimizations, I think some of the experiments that we have run in my team is tying performance improvements to your business metrics. So can running your page faster in certain server environments lead to higher conversions or not? And does that actually enable or promote you to invest into certain other cloud technologies, right? And I think that running those as an experiment before going to vendors and starting those conversations is, I think, a really great engineering cycles that you can run within your teams. Which brings me to the next point about building iterations, right? So I think that is also a key metrics that we start with defining the experiment itself. So in either outcome, how do you want to proceed with the experiment, right? If hypothesis is invalidated, where do we go from here? And I think bringing in, as I said before, your stakeholders in that definitions can also promote then the culture of experimentations within the team. One of the controversial point that I want to make here is that when you're starting to just run experiments within the company or within a team, I think having a failed experiment is a great way to also promote that culture, because when you have a failed experiment, you're challenging the product teams to rethink their hypothesis, right? And rethink that had we not done an experiment, we probably would have never learned this. So yeah.
One thing I'd like to jump in on there. I think you did a great job kind of covering, success and also the failure aspect. But there's a third outcome, which often with an experiment, is that you run something and it's kind of unclear. Does it do anything? Is it just neutral? Maybe some metrics are better, some metrics are worse, right? And I think it's a dangerous trap is maybe a little exaggerated, but it's something that a lot of teams do run into, because then you have these experiments and well, you're running them longer. Should we just give it more time? Do we want to iterate on them? Something. And that really requires active decision making, because what frequently happens is then you've got experiments that are just long running on production that never get cleaned up, that do cause tech debt, just issues, uncertainty in testing, all sorts of other issues. So it's really important to find that point and say, okay, the experiment is done now and we're going to do something with it, right? We're going to either, delete the experiment, go forward with it because we just like it better, even if the results are comparable. But it's super important to make sure to take that follow-up action and complete the experiment. Otherwise, you start losing out that cultural aspect, right? Then regardless of whether your experiment was a success or not, it's a experimentation culture failure. So
and to piggyback off of that, when an experiment is done, one of the most important things to do after that as well is to document it, right? Because at the end of the day, these companies change, people change, and being able to have a history of the things that you have tried and the results may not only benefit people down the line, but also having somewhere to be able to go back and look at and be like, all right, we tried this and this really worked, but we tried this and this didn't work. And, maybe that you can take that and use that to make decisions going forward on other things that you're going to try, other insights that you might have gained from those experiments that you can use going further. And just always having a good log of the things that you have tried, whether it be for people at the company now, people who may be, coming in the future, people getting added to teams, is also always really good to have.
Nice. Very good considerations from you all. Thank you very much. Now let's jump to some more technical aspects of the discussion, and we're going to start with CI and CD as a foundation. So CI and CD are often touted as enablers of experimentation, as we discussed so far. What role has a strong CI/CD pipeline played in your organization's ability to experiment? What advice would you give to teams still building their pipelines? Let's start with our CI/CD expert, Mo, here.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, especially for me, considering I work for a CI/CD company. But a strong CI/CD pipeline is really foundational for enabling effective experimentation, as we've been talking about. At Circle CI, we have a unique viewpoint where we get to see direct results in multiple organizations as to how implementing our platform has changed their approach to software development, completely. We've seen teams transition from infrequent high-risk deployments to a culture of continuous delivery and experimentation. And this shift really enables them to release features more confidently and respond to user feedback more rapidly. We've observed that when teams have a robust CI/CD process in place, they're able to iterate much faster and with much greater confidence, which is important. And that iteration is important, right? Because being able to try different things at a rapid pace while making sure that the speed of development doesn't cause issues with your application is really difficult to do. But when it is done well, it can lead to accelerated innovation, higher quality products, and a significant competitive advantage, right? Because you can stay ahead of your customers by trying, or stay ahead of your competition by trying different things and seeing what users really like, and still developing quickly enough, and utilizing that fast feedback loop to really improve your application quickly. So by iterating rapidly while maintaining application stability, you not only meet customer needs more effectively, but also empower your team to be more agile and responsive to market changes, right? Which again also helps you stay ahead of competition. And of course, at Circle CI, we follow that practice here as well. Because at the end of the day, a reliable CI/CD pipeline automates the integration and delivery of code changes, which reduces the time and effort required to test new ideas. So this automation means that developers can focus more on innovation rather than manual processes. And it also ensures that every change is tested and validated, which maintains system stability even as you experiment. So I guess my advice for teams that are still building their pipelines, I would say start by identifying the most critical parts of your workflow that can be automated. Begin with continuous integration by setting up automated builds and automated tests for every code commit, right? Make sure that everything that is going, from your, VCS, wherever your code is being stored, is, going through a repeated process that you have vetted and have made sure that it is a good testing process that, tests all the end cases of your code. Um, it's a good practice because it catches issues early, right? That whole idea of shifting left, and provides immediate feedback to developers, right? And then next, I would say gradually incorporate continuous delivery practices. So you want to automate your deployment processes so that you are always ready to release new features or updates, right? We get a lot of data and we see consistently that the top performing teams deploy to production multiple times a day, right? Because they're confident that if a change makes it through their pipelines, it can be automatically deployed. And this is important too. You have to make sure that your tests are thorough. You have to make sure that you have full coverage on your tests so that you can have that confidence that you can say, hey, this passed all of these tests and it's good enough for production, right? And then, of course, also make sure that you choose tools that integrate well with your existing tech stack. Again, shameless plug here, but Circle CI is great because it supports numerous languages and frameworks, and it makes it really adaptable to various environments. But remember, the goal is to create fast feedback loops and reduce manual intervention. This not only accelerates your experimentation efforts, but it also improves your overall code quality and team efficiency, right? So building your CI/CD pipeline incrementally allows you to reap the benefits early on while continuously enhancing your capabilities. Are there any thoughts or feedback here from the rest of the team?
I can jump in. I think completely agree with all of that. And obviously you're the CI/CD expert, but I think one of the important things, and you touched on a little bit, I touched on a little bit on earlier, is thinking through what the testing looks like around feature flags, around experimentation. I think this is also something
Absolutely.
teams get wrong very often, right? Because it's, oh, we're not ready for this, we're not ready for an end-to-end test, whatever. And then maybe in the testing environment, somebody's flipped a flag to something else and tests are failing or flaky. That causes confusion. Or the other side of things, right? Tests aren't checking for a feature that's live in production to maybe 50% or at full rollout 100% of customers, and you're testing the old version of a feature, or you're skipping the experimental version altogether. So it's very, very important to make sure that as you're building a new experiment, that you think through what does the testing of that look like, both in manual cases, but also very much in the automated case and how it fits into the whole CI/CD pipeline. And that's also why, touching back to what we talked about earlier, it is so important to clean up at the end as well. so that you don't have to maintain all these different branches in your testing logic.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the questions I get usually from teams is, do we need to test an experiment not knowing if it's going to be successful or not, right? And I think that's as good of a question that is, right? I think if you really want your systems to be stable, it's a no-brainer. It's a no deal, right? But I think having all of the things that Mo and Anthony mentioned, having your CI/CD pipeline robust, having your test suite not flaky, and then ensuring that it's only testing production parts and not any stale parts, will not only like ensure your experimentation stability, but are also going to increase your velocity in terms of like building and testing those experiments.
Nice. Thank you all. Pooja, you touched like something that's a good segue for our next question. Balanced experimentation with stability. So my question to you is, engineering teams often face pressure to maintain system stability while experimenting. How do you strike balance between innovation and ensuring your systems remain reliable and performant?
Yes, I think a lot of points we touched upon already, right? Like ensuring that your systems are reliable, and that comes with having having a solid CI/CD pipeline, ensuring that you are doing incremental rollouts, ensuring that you have rollback strategies in as part of your plan. One of the things that we heavily invested in is observability, right? So ensuring that we have the right alerting and monitoring tools that can help us respond to failures as soon as possible, and ensuring that in addition to this, we have the right thresholds set up as well, right? Because as you grow as a company, those thresholds changes as well, right? Your acceptance to a failure can change depending on how mature you are in terms of your experimentation cycle. So all of these things can help you not only have a solid environment, a testing environment, but then also a system that can react to those experimentation in a faster way.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I think on top of that too, like Butcher said, it's your environments are really important, right? On our end, we, kind of take the isolated testing environment route where, we can have like a dev environment, right? And actually do some pretty solid testing there. And all of this is built into our CI/CD pipeline, of course. And making sure that experiments don't interfere with stable code, until you have done some pretty thorough testing. And then, using feature flags, right? Being able to control the exposure of new features, and then allowing you to do rollouts and be able to test a little bit in production as well, right? Be able to get some of that user data back. At the end of the day, it's much easier to do a small gradual rollout of a feature, test it on a small percentage of your users than, pushing it out completely and being like, hey, this is a new feature, we're going live with it and we'll see what happens, because a lot of times that is where you can run into some issues. That's where you can, have something that goes out where, a particular use case, that wasn't, fully implemented in your testing suite. And then, all of a sudden you start getting feedback from users like, hey, this particular thing isn't working, this particular thing isn't working. And again, the goal is to be able to deploy to production multiple times per day, right? So you want to be able to have the confidence behind those deployments, so that, you can deploy multiple times a day, right? Because if you get up to that pace and then you realize, oh, all of a sudden we're getting a lot of really negative user feedback, you're going to look at the whole process and be like, oh, why are we deploying so frequently? Maybe we have to kind of roll things back and change the way that we do things. So the idea is to roll things out slowly. And, even though, you may want to kind of take your process and be like, yeah, we want to be a high, functioning, high deploying team. Getting there is very difficult. And, I've worked with a whole bunch of customers to get there, and that takes a lot of time. So being able to take small steps as well along that process is also really important.
Yeah. Completely agree. I think what also really helps is planning your rollout a little bit. It's good when, planning your experiment to think through, okay, what are our milestones, right? At what point are we going to go from, 1% to 5% to 20 to 50 or whatever it may be, whatever's appropriate for you. And really thinking through, not only how much traffic do we need to determine, success on an experiment, but also what's our risk tolerance with certain features, right? You'll have certain features, if you're changing something in your payment system, you're probably going to want to be a little more careful than if you're, changing the color of a button, right? So really thinking through that, discussing that, and that in the team being aligned on that, and ideally having it written down somewhere and saying, okay, this is our milestone, this is what'll trigger increased rollout, right? Very similar to if you have, as part of your CI/CD system, canary deployments, something like that, you can essentially do the same thing with your experiments you roll out, right? And you want to make sure you get it to that point where you'll be able to collect enough data, but start by rolling it out to a point where you're just focused on stability and make sure nothing's going wrong.
Nice, thank you. So we're going to wrap up with the questions. We touched so many interesting topics here. Feedback loop, measuring success, stability, automation, fast development, fast deployment too, and the learning faster than anyone else. So we're going to now to go to Q&A. And thank you very much for very exciting discussions. We have one question about, and I'm going to read to all of you also for the listeners of this session. Do you have recommendations about how to build an experimentation culture in B2B products where feedback can be slower than in B2C products? For example, early renew and where renews aren't necessarily correlated to the usage rates.
Yeah, I'd love to jump on this one. This is something, we're absolutely dealing with at Charles. We're a B2B company, and you have to be a little bit more careful, but you also just have to approach the situation differently, right? Your success metrics may be a little more qualitative than quantitative, right? It may be about rolling it out to a specific set of, alpha or beta customers who are a little bit more open to change, seeing how they react, getting feedback, iterating at that point, iterating within that group before rolling it out to a broader set, right? I think when you've got a B2C product or even a B2B product, but with, hundreds of thousands of users, you do more of a percentage-based rollout. But I think in B2B product, a lot of the time it makes more sense to have that set of customers you're rolling out to, get that feedback, see how it goes. And that can work really well. It can also build a lot of trust with customers. It's actually the value you can bring to certain customers who are excited about change, who want to see your platform evolve, and who get to feel a little bit special, right? Because they get to be part of this. So it's a little bit of a different approach where you're not going to be maybe looking at usage rates so much, but you can still do it, and you just have to make sure you get that buy-in.
Thank you. Jump in. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, just building on top of that, I think it becomes a little bit difficult when you have a product that's same for your B2B and B2C customers as it is in our case. So I think we have intentionally excluded our B2B users from the B2C experimentation to not create invariation in their behaviors. However, I think as Anthony was saying, right, I think with B2B customers, you have this special relationship building aspect as well, where you can roll out a feature specific to a company or to a customer, and then listen to their feedback and build on top of it. The other aspect that goes to success measuring about B2B is, yes, renewals are much later in the cycle, but I think an easier or early leading metric that you have on renewals is engagement, right? And I think you can definitely measure that with your B2B customers, which can eventually help you measure renewals.
Thank you. We got another question here in Q&A. In your experience, who should be involved in defining success metrics for an experiment?
It's a great question again. I think, as I said, it's a partnership, right? It's a partnership between product and engineering. So the more you bring your stakeholders in setting up an experiment, in defining the hypothesis, in building that PRD, the more understanding you have about what you are trying to test, what you're trying to build. That not only helps us to write the right hypothesis, but then also the right metrics for that experiment itself. So I think it starts with a great partnership between stakeholders and product, and then eventually product and engineering to define the success metric. I think it's a non-negotiable to not have engineering metrics assigned to an experiment, because as we said before, right, having a stable and performance system is is the foundation, right, to build the experimentation practices on. So having those thresholds defined, having those health metrics defined in certain feature areas. It might not be different for every experiment, but it could be different per feature sets. So engineering product partnership and then product stakeholder partnership in defining the hypothesis.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. I was just gonna add and say, yeah, I mean, Pooja nailed that. At Circle CI, it's also we kind of defining success metrics should be a collaborative effort, right? It should bring together multiple perspectives within the organization. So we want cross-functional teams to be able to define these success. And so, again, that good product, the product team, engineering team, we like to pull in the data team, the people who are going to be going through the statistics, right? And to advise the validity of those metrics as well is super, super helpful. And then of course, stakeholders and business leaders, right? And, making sure that they're informed and they know of these metrics, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to be evaluating these metrics in the end, right? And so making sure that everybody who's involved in the process is there from the beginning is really important, so that nobody is, surprised at the end, when we're pulling in people and going through the results of the experiment.
Okay, thank you. We have around 2-3 minutes left, and then we still have one question maybe we can cover. So the question is about how do we suggest shift the culture when there's like high tech debt?
Yeah, I can take a crack at this. And so the one shouldn't necessarily be related to the other. I completely understand how this ends up connecting, but I think you can use experimentation to also help eliminate some tech debt and use it as a safe place to try to go after certain things, right? Because oftentimes tech debt is, associated with some feature debt, or, Pooja was talking earlier about, you're trying to improve performance somewhere, right? It's not always possible to wrap tech debt changes in an experiment, but when you can do it, it's even better because it creates more of that safe space, and if possible. But generally speaking, I wouldn't see these things as one-to-one connected. I think they're both things that can be worked on in an engineering team culture. But you should go after experimentation for kind of all the reasons we talked about earlier, and find out how to make that setup work, even if you do have a lot of tech that you're dealing.
Nice, thank you. Okay, if you don't have anything else to add in that question, okay, thank you very much. We're going to wrap up. For those ones that submitted questions and didn't have time, we're going to be heading over now to the lead that's like channel technical strategy, and we're going to continue the discussions and the questions in that channel. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you in the next time. So have all a good rest of the day, good evening, and yeah, see you.